Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And with your permission, I'm leaving the stage because I can't stand in front of a podium. I've got to stay moving. I'm really excited to be here with you guys this morning. We've had a great conference so far. I'll actually be referring back to some of the other educational opportunities. But this morning, we're going to talk about cleaning the clean room, what it takes to maintain that SEC. So we'll run through our presentation objectives this morning. I want you to leave here with an understanding of what the current chapter of 797 requires to maintain an SEC. We're going to talk about the types of supplies that you need to use and source when you're cleaning that room. We want to talk about the required frequency. How often does the chapter want us to clean those items? And that can vary depending on if we're making category 1 and 2 drugs or category 3 drugs. And we're also going to talk about best practice methods to clean all surfaces in an SEC. Best practices. You know, Mark brought up a great point in his presentation yesterday when he showed Table 10. The title of Table 10, the first word is minimum, the minimum standard. So if you do what that chart says, you've just done the bare minimum. We'll talk about some best practices that maybe go beyond what those bare minimums are. I always like to start and end my presentations with a quote, and this is one that I love. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. That's what we want to create with our cleaning folks, our habits. We want them to walk in and without even having to think about, no, they're going to be going cleanest to dirtiest. What bottles are they using? What are the dwell times for those agents? So we want these to be habitual, things that are sort of implanted into them. Let's start with the why. You know, the folks that come in and clean that room are every bit as important as the pharmacist that compounds the prep or the nurse that administers it. When it comes to the safety of that patient, preventing harm to that patient, the folks that are in there doing that cleaning are every bit as important as the pharmacists, the nurses, and the doctors in that facility. It is a complete circle that needs to be completed. Talk a little bit about what the chapter requires from a personnel training and evaluation standpoint. Abby and Kara did a great presentation yesterday talking about developing training programs for your cleaning staff. The new chapter is very prescriptive when it comes to talking about folks who compound or folks that have direct oversight over compounding. So you've got a designated person in there, you've got prescribed schedules for your aseptic technique and your glove fingertip sampling. But when it comes to personnel who clean and stock the room, this is the sentence from the chapter. And I laughed yesterday when Abby said she just reread that sentence from the chapter. So the chapter says that personnel who only perform restocking and cleaning or disinfecting duties outside of the PEC must complete ongoing training as required by the facility's SOPs. So it's going to be up to you to go back and develop what the training programs are going to be for your cleaning personnel and staff. You have got to develop those. When we talk about the importance of having a detailed SOP or protocol, you really want to be, I say, overly prescriptive when you're describing these tasks. USP 797 only establishes cleaning frequencies, tells us how often we need to clean. It does talk about general principles of cleanest to dirtiest, but it doesn't actually tell us how to clean a wall, what's the best way to clean a floor, and you want to add that into your protocol. You're asking technicians to clean something they can't see. The smallest thing you can see with the human naked eye is about 40 microns in size, and that's this little piece of dirt that's floating just in front of the beam coming out of that projector. There's still dirt right here and we can't see it. We can see it when we got the assistance of that bright light, or when you were a little kid telling ghost stories, shining a flashlight around a room, you would see those particles of dirt. Those little particles you see are 40 microns in size, and we're asking technicians to clean something that's smaller than 1 micron. You're asking people to clean something they cannot see. That's a difficult job. And then as a supervisor, how do you know that they've cleaned the surface right? You can't see and tell that it's been done right. The only way you can have confidence is to develop strict protocols, procedures in place that you're going to use so that you can know that surface is clean. I like to use this is a tool I like to use, A plus B equals C. You've got to give people the right tool to use. I handed someone a string mop and asked them to go clean that wall, they wouldn't be able to do a very good job. So we've got to give them the right tool. You've got to teach them the right process. We're going to go into this clean room. We're going to start in our buffer room. We're going to start on that far wall. We'll finish the buffer room. Then we'll move into our ante room. You've got to prescribe those procedures. That way you can be confident in that validated result. A plus B equals C. So I want to talk a little bit about what the chapter requires as far as the agents and the supplies that you're going to need for cleaning in a space. In classified areas outside of the PEC, sterile cleaning and disinfecting agents should be used. So we know the chapter says inside of our PEC we must use sterile disinfectants, but outside of the PEC the chapter says should be used. Do you have to use sterile disinfectants? So that is not a must. That has got to be for you to decide based on really your environmental monitoring. And if an inspector were to walk in and say, why are you using a non-sterile disinfectant in your clean room? And you can pull out years worth of environmental monitoring and surface reports that say, we've been maintaining a state of control in this space, that should hopefully be a good enough answer for that inspector. If you are using diluted cleaning agents, sterile water should be used. Ready to use or RTU products are considered best practice versus trying to dilute stuff, but if you are diluting, you should use sterile water. All of your cleaning supplies, with the exception of the tools and handles, must be low lint, and that is new language in the 2022 chapter. It's truly defining all of our mop pads and wipes that we may use to go and clean anything, all that stuff, because we're in a classified space, it's got to be low lint. We don't want to introduce any new particles or fibers into the environment. Reusable cleaning tools must be made of cleanable materials and must be cleaned and disinfected before and after every use. This is new in the 2022 chapter as well. So before I go in and start cleaning, I need to specifically take a step and add it to my protocol that I'm going to clean and disinfect that mop handle. Then I can clean and disinfect the room, and then I'll need to clean and disinfect that mop handle again before I place it on its storage space. Continuing on with what the chapter requires for our supplies, the wipes, pads, sponges, and pads should be disposable. So that's a best practice to use disposable cleaning products versus sort of the relaunderable type of mop. So that is a should in the chapter. The reusable cleaning tools must be dedicated for use in that classified area or the SCA and must not be removed from these areas for disposal. So it's basically saying you can't sort of have a cleaning cart outside in the general area of the pharmacy and roll it into the pharmacy. You've got to have those cleaning tools in that space, stored in that space, and only removed for disposal. If you're doing hazardous compounding, have a second set of hardware in that hazardous space. Never bring that hardware back into your non-hazardous side of your PEC. They must be discarded based on the condition of the tools. So as the sort of manager of a facility, I would take it upon myself at least weekly or perhaps monthly to go and check the hardware to see if there's any corrosion or any broken parts on that mop hardware and make sure you replace that when it needs to be done. This is not from the chapter. This is my little thing. So I'll put parentheses, not from chapter. Store your cleaning materials so they won't get contaminated. The chapter does require this for your garb. It says you need to store your garb away from the sink to avoid splashing or any other contamination. So if you got one of these nice Tupperware totes here, go ahead and you can store your mop heads in there. You've got that there in your ante room. You've got your mop handle, so your cleaning supplies are there and won't get contaminated. As I mentioned, don't bring cleaning carts from outside of the clean room into there. So if you've got EVS personnel, I saw someone laughing a minute ago this, but I have seen it happen. Even once I saw them, they parked their cart outside of the pharmacy, opened the door and propped the door open, and then they would walk out of the room and in and out with their supplies. So don't bring cleaning supplies from the outside into your cleaning room. We talked about the chapter says should use disposable products, so a best practice is to only use disposable products. When you start using relaundered products, depending on how good the laundry is in that facility, has that laundry process been validated? What might you be reintroducing from a previous cleaning? And then the backer plates that hold those sort of pads, it's always Velcro. Whenever you rip a fabric off of Velcro, you're gonna create particles, you're gonna shed stuff into the environment. So make sure you're not using sort of Velcro style backer plates, and avoid using those relaunderable mops. Use a disposable product. So I want to talk really quickly, and I won't dwell a long time on it, but how the chapter defines cleaning, disinfecting, and sporicidal agents. Did anyone come to station 10 yesterday with me? You probably heard me use this adage that you can clean without disinfecting, but you can't disinfect without cleaning. So they are two separate steps. They want you to clean something and then disinfect something, unless you're using an EPA-registered one-step cleaner disinfectant, and then your cleaning and disinfecting become one task. So I pulled out table 9 from the chapter. Basically, it says that the process of cleaning involves removing organic and inorganic materials from a surface, usually using a mechanical process. So I'm transferring from my target surface onto a wipe or a pad and then disposing of that pad. Disinfecting, you're going to destroy microorganisms, usually with a chemical agent, and the process of applying sporicidal disinfectants. The word sporicidal doesn't appear in the currently enforceable 2008 chapter. So all of our sporicidal requirements are new, and it will vary. The frequency of using sporicidals is going to differ if you're doing category 1 and 2 versus category 3, but the application of sporicidal disinfectants is a new part of the chapter, and it must be incorporated into your protocols. I always like to just throw in this note, sterile IPA is not a cleaning agent. There are no surfactants in sterile alcohol. So we do have folks that think they are cleaning and disinfecting. There are a few, as Mark pointed out, disinfectants that have registration, so they are registered disinfectants, but they've got 5, sometimes 10-minute dwell times. Very difficult to achieve in a clean room environment. We're constantly having so much air movement. So just remember that sterile IPA is not a cleaning agent. There's no surfactant in that. Section 8.1 talks about bringing items into our clean room, into our SEC. So our cleaning supplies when we first receive them, or anything that's going to go into that space. The chapter now specifically calls that a procedure. Before any item is brought onto the clean side of that line of demarcation, it must be wiped with either sterile IPA, a sporicidal disinfectant, or an EPA-registered disinfectant. So taking items into the clean room, they give us a choice of 3 things, IPA, disinfectant, or sporicidal. As a best practice, and I put it in bold, I'm going to recommend that you use a sporicidal disinfectant. Most of the items you buy are shipped to your hospital in corrugated cardboard boxes. Corrugated cardboard is a significant source of sporicidal contamination. So it's best practice to wipe those items down with the sporicide before you take them into the clean room. So we've got that choice going into the clean room. We can wipe with IPA, sporicide, or disinfectant. Once we're in the clean room, if you're going to put anything into your PEC, what do we have to use? I heard sterile IPA over here, and then I heard disinfectant over here. If I had cookies, I'd send the cookies over here, because sterile IPA is the right answer there. For the PEC only, the chapter says you must wipe it with sterile 70% IPA before I place it in the PEC. But going into the clean room itself, I've got the choice of the 3, IPA, disinfectant, or a sporicidal. I recommend a sporicidal. If you do use your disinfectant, obviously you need to make sure you meet your dwell time and know what the dwell times are for any of those cleaning agents. And if you use sterile IPA, you need to make sure that it doesn't affect the label. Sometimes IPA can smear the inks on labels, so you've got to ensure that you do not affect the label or render it unreadable. Required cleaning frequencies. So I took this table from the chapter, but since today we're only talking about the SEC, I removed the top of that chart where it talked about PEC and removable work surfaces. So this is our chart directly from the chapter on what our required cleaning frequencies are. So for our cleaning and disinfecting, again, we can combine these first 2 columns if we're using a one-step cleaner disinfectant, because we're using a product that cleans and disinfects at the same time. So our pass-through chambers, work surfaces outside of the PEC, so that's our tabletops, our carts, any of those type of items. And then we've got our floors, walls, doors, and door frames, ceilings, storage shelves and bins, and then our equipment outside of the PEC. So daily, we've got to clean our pass-throughs, our work surfaces, and our floors. That has to occur daily on days when compounding occurs. That's also a new caveat in the 2022 chapter. Instead of just saying daily, it now says daily on days when compounding occurs. And then monthly, we need to clean our walls, our doors, our ceilings, storage shelves, and any of that equipment that we've got located outside of the PEC. For the application of a sporicidal disinfectant, for these first 3 rows, the pass-throughs, our work surfaces, and our floors, if we're doing category 3 compounding, we must use a sporicidal at least weekly. If we're doing category 1 and 2 compounding, we must apply a sporicide at least monthly. And then for our walls, ceilings, storage shelves, and bins, and any of that equipment outside of the PEC, that's got to have a sporicide applied at least monthly. Again, the title of this table is the minimum frequency. So if you want to have a better practice, if you're doing a lot of HDs and you're doing a lot of HD preps, maybe you want to apply a sporicide and do decontamination more frequently. Do sort of a risk assessment on your end to decide, do we need to increase this cleaning frequency above the bare minimum that's required by the chapter? So let's talk about the process to clean and disinfect our ceilings. So we're going to now get into the nitty-gritty of the best practices of how we actually clean. So we're going to use unidirectional, overlapping strokes. We're going to go and start in the cleanest part of our buffer room and clean our way towards the anteroom. Whenever you're cleaning over your head, ceilings or walls, you should have eye protection, and not just goggles, like goggles that seal to the side of your face. Whether it's Context Chemistries or anyone's chemistries, they're designed to disinfect walls and kill microorganisms. You don't want that dripping into your eye. So anytime you're cleaning above your head, make sure you're wearing full eye protection. We want to start in the cleanest area of the room using unidirectional, overlapping strokes. So you clean from ISO 7 towards your ISO 8 anteroom. You want to make sure your ceilings stay wet for the dwell time. So you need to observe, and I've heard of inspectors with stopwatches, and they will sit there and watch to make a surface stays wet for the amount of time you're doing. So make sure you're getting enough liquid to achieve that dwell time on the ceiling, and allow that ceiling to dry completely before compounding resumes. You can't compound while you're cleaning. They've got to be 2 separate steps. If you're a 24/7 facility, that means you must schedule in an hour or 2 hours every day where we're going to stop making meds and clean this room, because they can't take place at the same time. I also got asked yesterday, they had a very large clean room and they were having trouble timing-wise trying to clean every surface in the room on the same day every month. The chapter says we've got to clean everything once a month. It doesn't say on the same day of every month. So you can break that up and make it a little bit easier on your staff from a scheduling perspective, and have different areas of the room, as long as every surface is going to be cleaned and have a sporicide applied at least monthly. I'm going to click back to this chart. Basically, the cheat sheet is that sporicide is monthly. If I'm only doing category 1 and 2, every single thing in my clean room has to have a sporicide put on it monthly. So our monthly clean, the thing we shall never call a terminal clean, our monthly clean, everything's a sporicide. That just sort of simplifies that process for us. All right, click back here. Let's talk about the process to clean and disinfect our walls. Again, I want to make sure we're wearing eye protection, because we will have that mop up over our head as we're on the top part of the wall. You want to clean small items first, like light switches and stop signs. That's a general rule I use for cleaning anything in a clean room. I want to clean the small stuff first. So if they asked me to clean this wall back here, the first thing I would do would by hand go and clean the lighted exit signs. I would clean the sconce on the wall. I would clean the light switch, the thermostat. Then I could come back with my big wall mop and clean the large flat surfaces. So we always want to clean those small items first. We're going to again start in the cleanest area of our room using unidirectional, overlapping strokes, starting in our ISO 7 space, working out towards our anteroom in our ISO 8 space. Make sure, again, your walls stay wet for the appropriate dwell time, and allow your walls to dry completely before compounding resumes. I'm going to use some animations here in just a moment that'll help bring some of this to life. In this picture here, you notice that I'm using vertical strokes coming down to about waist level, and then on the bottom, I've switched to horizontal strokes. In just a minute, I'll talk about why I think that's a better practice than just using our traditional straight up and down vertical strokes. Whenever I'm out training folks to clean rooms, I always say that's sort of the wrong analogy, especially if we're bringing folks in from EMS or EVS. that have been cleaning ORs that could literally have blood spattered on the walls. And they get assigned to clean the clean room, and they walk into the clean room, and they're literally just like, well, what do you want me to clean? This is the cleanest room I've ever been in my life. You know, they really shouldn't see, if they've got a white mop face and they wipe down a wall, it should be completely white. There should not be any dirt visible on that mop. So the analogy of telling people that we want you to go in and clean this clean room, I'd rather tell them, I want you to go in and paint this room with disinfectant. That's what we're doing, is we're painting with disinfectant. We're getting disinfectant on up to every surface. So I'm going to take this clean room, and I'm sure we all at one point painted our college apartment or the first place we moved into. So let's transition this clean room over into a room just like at home that we're going to have. And if we're going to paint this room, the first thing we need to do is get a little trim brush. We're going to get a little trim brush, and we're going to go and we're going to paint maybe a strip beneath the crown molding, a strip above the baseboards. We'll want to go and paint a square around that thermostat. We'll paint a square around the window. If there's any light switches there, we want to paint little squares around those. So once we're done painting that, now we can get our big paint roller. And we can go using basically unidirectional, overlapping strokes from the cleanest to the dirtiest. And it is not drawing it, so let me... Here we go. Unidirectional, overlapping strokes from the cleanest to the dirtiest. You know, we're painting a white wall blue here. If I miss a spot, you're going to see it. If you miss a spot when you're painting with disinfectant, that's a harbor point. That's an opportunity for something to grow that can cause harm to your patient. So let's take our sort of analogy here back into a clean room. And the first thing we're going to do, again, if we've got our clean room, before we used our little trim brush to paint out, so we're going to get a handheld wipe. We're going to go clean our light switches, our exit signs, any power outlets that are on the wall. You have to get down on your hands and knees and clean those air returns with a wipe. You cannot just run a mop across them and expect that it be clean. So by hand, we're going to clean our light switch. We're going to clean that air return. We're going to clean our pass-through by hand, doing all of our trim work with that tiny little paintbrush. So once we've done that, now we can get our big paint roller, our wall mop that we're going to use to put disinfectant, paint it up on the wall. Oop, I keep forgetting I can't walk in front of the projector. Using unidirectional, overlapping strokes, moving from the cleanest to the dirtiest. Don't miss a spot. So I mentioned a moment ago on that diagram, in this animation you've just seen here, our strokes went all the way to the top, bottom, using that vertical motion. But the problem is this cove section of the floor, that's really part of the floor. That's not part of the wall. And if I come down and I'm not very careful when I bring that mop down on its final stroke, and I basically hit the baseboard or the cove section of the floor, I'm now taking the dirtiest part of the room and then reintroducing it to the top of the ceiling. So that's why when we look at this animation, I really prefer this hybrid method, where I'm using my unidirectional overlapping strokes coming down about waist level, just below that pass-through, and then I'll use horizontal strokes at the very bottom. So think about that as a better way to clean your wall, but when you're training your folks, remove cleaning from your vocabulary and sort of give that analogy of painting. We're going into this room and we're going to paint every square inch of this room with disinfectant, sporicide, whatever chemistry we're using, that's what we're doing. So let's talk about cleaning our floors. So we've been using unidirectional overlapping strokes for cleaning all of our walls and ceilings. But on our floor, I'm going to talk about a little bit of a different scenario here, and it's an S motion. So we always want to start at the corner furthest from the exit and clean towards the door. Again, using our cleanest to dirtiest analogy. Start by cleaning the horizontal that is cove to the wall. So we're going to clean that baseboard section first on one. Then we'll do one long stroke along the outside wall. That's that orange stripe you see along the wall before we begin our S motion working our way out. Make sure your dwell time is met and allow your floors to dry completely before compounding resumes. Let's take a look at it in animation. We're going to start by cleaning that cove section or the baseboard. We'll do one long stroke along the outside wall before we begin our S curve, working our way out. Why do we want to do that orange stroke, working our way out of the room? I call it the pizza slices. You see these little things right here? If I had just come in and started my S motion, I would have missed a spot. That would be an opportunity for something to grow. So we want to come in, use one stroke on that outside to clean our cove section of the floor, one long stroke on the outside edge before we begin our S curve. One thing that I do want to mention, because it doesn't really show it that well in this animation, the camera is not pulled back far enough, but it almost looks like in that animation that it wants me to do S curves the entire length of the clean room, and then back over here, and I'll curve this way. That is not really what this animation is telling you. Basically, that S curve ended right here. I basically picked about a 3-panel sort of a width that I could work with and work that way. Then I moved down to the next section of the room, did my S curve on those next 3 panels of the wall, onto the wall, and so on. So just wanted to make that clear. One last look at that animation. My water's up here on the stage. So the process, special considerations. The edge, that cove section where the floor meets the wall, aka the baseboard, there is a small edge. It's a noticeable edge that's on that. Another thing that you're going to have to get down on your hands and knees and clean with a wipe. You can't just run a wipe across that and expect it to have been cleaned. Special considerations. Never break the plane of the PEC while cleaning. Patty yesterday told a great story about someone had rolled up a anti-fatigue mat in front of a PEC and actually placed it inside the PEC so that they can mop underneath it. I've seen, you're always looking for somewhere to sort of lean a mop handle so it doesn't fall over on the ground. I've seen people, they need to do stuff and they just lean their mop and the end of the handle where their hand has been touching is stuck right into the center of the PEC. So when you're instructing, folks from E&F and EVS, they're used to being in the operating room. The analogy I always use is that's your anesthesia cart. You're never going to touch that PEC inside or out unless, and it is rare that the EVS staff is going to be trained to clean the PEC. And Abby and Kara yesterday did a great presentation on what that would entail if you were going to have EVS folks that were assigned to clean inside the PEC versus just cleaning the clean room itself. Continuing on with some special considerations, water sources. The sink gets its own section in the new chapter. It was sort of embedded into other language in the 2008 chapter, but section 4.4 says the surfaces of the sink must be cleaned and disinfected each day of use, and you must use a sporicidal disinfectant at least monthly. Pay particular attention to your drain. Your drains are really where you might have any buildup. So if you've got sort of a pad you can use to scrub some of that drain area with your disinfectant or your sporicide, which is your best practice there. And then your order of hand washing and garbing is going to depend on your placement of that sink. The 2008 chapter basically had our sink always on the clean side of the line of demarcation. We now do have the flexibility. We could put that sink on the dirty side of the line of demarcation, but it would change our donning sequence. We're not going to get into all those details today, but it is something you need to consider. Let's talk about storage bins. How many folks have a lot of storage bins in their clean room? How many people have more storage bins in their clean room than they probably should? Oh, it's the same number of hands that went up. It's great how that math works. USP does not forbid you from keeping those storage bins in the clean room, but if they're in there, they have to be cleaned every month. Not only the bins themselves, but the shelf on which that bin rests and the contents that are in that bin. So if you do have those bins, basically you want to make sure that you first clean and disinfect a table that you can bring all of those supplies down onto. So we've cleaned and disinfected our work surface, and we'll begin. Let's remove all the bins from the shelf, and we'll empty their contents onto that freshly cleaned work surface. Little tip here, you see in the picture, I've got the vials in a Ziploc bag versus just dumping 20 individual vials on a table. If I were to store those in a Ziploc bag, I essentially need to clean the inside and outside of that bag before placing it back in the bin. So a little tip there to save you some time. Once you've got all the bins off of your shelf, I need to clean and disinfect the shelf. And that means unidirectional, overlapping strokes with a low-lint wiper and a disinfectant, making sure I achieve my dwell time, 1 minute or 3 minutes. Once that's done, we can remove the contents from the bin, and then we need to clean and disinfect the bin itself, inside or out. And these bins aren't easy to clean. They've got all these recessed ridges and edges to create strength in that thing, and it actually makes them pretty difficult to clean all the edges. Then we need to clean and disinfect the contents that were on the work surface, place them back into the bin. That's where using a Ziploc bag can save you a lot of time. We need to repeat that process, making sure you've cleaned every bin and its contents, and then you can put all those bins back up onto the freshly cleaned, disinfected shelf. It is a cumbersome process. Again, USP does not forbid you from storing anything in your clean room, but anything that's in there must be cleaned monthly. So can you store some of that stuff outside and only bring in what you're going to need for that day's work? That's probably a better practice for you to follow. A couple of other special considerations are high-touch surfaces. This is one I see a lot, chair adjustments in front of a PEC, but they're not being cleaned and disinfected frequently. So really, the easy high-touch surfaces are light switches, door handles, but go into your facility and do a visual audit. Really watch people's steps through their daily process. What are they frequently touching? And make sure we're cleaning and disinfecting those frequently. Don't buy items that are so large they can't be easily cleaned. I love this. This is our clean room studio in South Carolina, and that's just an industrial trash can from our warehouse area. It is impossible for me to get into the bottom of that can and properly clean it. So just buy something that's more appropriately sized so that you can easily make sure you clean all parts of that. One of the universal truths that I have seen as I go and visit clean rooms all across this country is that casters never lie. It's a little tip. The first thing I look at when I walk into someone's clean room, the first thing I look at is their casters, because that tells me everything I need to know about what they've been doing to maintain that space. You've got to clean and disinfect those casters, but they're a pinch point. You can actually hurt your hand by down there. So what I'm going to recommend you do is put a low-lint wipe onto the floor and just overly saturate that, and then roll your casters back and forth on it. Casters never lie. So let's review some of our key takeaways. We always want to clean and disinfect our hardware before and after every use. Think of it like painting with disinfectant. Total coverage is important. If you miss a spot when you're painting with disinfectant, that's an opportunity for something to grow and cause harm to a patient. Wipe down any items before taking them into the SEC. We're going to recommend as a best practice that you use a sporicidal disinfectant for that. The required cleaning frequencies, that's table 10. So get that table 10, get a photocopy of that, use that when you develop your protocol. And keep in mind, those are your minimums. You can always do more. Develop your training requirements for your cleaning personnel. That's going to be up to you to develop what your training protocols are going to be for staff that are coming in to clean the room. Make sure you document it. Make sure they do what you document. Someone, I think Abby, said yesterday, people will only respect what you inspect. Excuse me, on with our key takeaways, making sure we're using unidirectional overlapping strokes for our ceiling walls and tables. We're going to use that S motion when we're cleaning our floors. When we're going to clean walls, we want to do the small stuff first. We want to do our light switches, exit signs, anything like that. Don't forget high-touch surfaces like chair adjustments. Casters never lie. And I always like to end with a quote as well. Success is the sum of details. And that's all we've talked about this morning are details. A plus B equals C. Unidirectional, overlapping strokes. Knowing, if I'm category 1 and 2, I'm doing sporicidal at least monthly, starting in the cleanest area of the room, working our way out to the anteroom. All of these details are what creates success. And what is success for us? It's preventing harm to patients. That's why we are here. So I'm going to open it up for questions now. Invite you. I've thrown my contact information on there and also invite you to follow me on LinkedIn. I'm always posting stuff on there. I'm going to throw this evaluation code and I'm going to head back to the podium to answer questions.
So one of the changes to the chapter in the cleaning table that I found interesting was that the ceilings of the segregated compounding area only are required to be cleaned when they're like visibly soiled or known to be contaminated. Do you have recommendations on the cleaning of the ceiling in the SCA, frequency, et cetera?
Right, so that is, and let's see if I can flip back here. I believe I cut it off when I edited out the chart on table 10. There is an asterisk there. We're going to get there, guys. Hang with me. Because that's a great point, Abby. Doot, doot, doot. There we go. I'm going to come back down. So I cut it off here, but there was an asterisk. You see the ceiling, that footnote C right there? That's what Abby was just talking about. And it says, the ceilings in your SCA only need to be cleaned when visibly soiled or contamination is known to be there. The real primary reason for that is most SCAs don't have a sealed ceiling. Sometimes it's just a dropped acoustic ceiling. And if I were to put a mop up there and hit that tile, I would actually likely cause more contamination to fall down on the space. You know, I don't have a great solution. If you don't have a sealed ceiling, don't clean it, even though the chapter says you need to if it's visibly soiled. I guess my answer would be see if you can get the ceiling tiles at least sealed in place, taped in place so that you can at least go up there and lightly try to mop those. Just out of curiosity, how many folks are compounding in an SCA? All right, so we've got a couple and then most of their folks have got a clean room. So that's a great consideration. Other questions? I went a little, I talked fast this morning, so we'll be able to give you guys a little bit of time left. But I'm going to be down at Station 10 later today in the sterile compounding clinic. I'll be around the show, so please come up and ask questions if you have them. Any other questions? Well, here we go.
So if you use the plastic Ziploc bags for your supplies in the clean room, do you keep them in there permanently in that Ziploc bag? And if so, like how often do you recommend replacing the plastic bag? Or do you just put them in there while you're cleaning and then throw away that bag afterward?
Yeah, so are you talking about when you're wetting your mop pads out, perhaps?
So like if you have syringes and needles and stuff in a bin, and then you put them in a plastic bag to like clean them
I
out.
see what you're asking.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I would, there's nothing prescribed in that, but I would change those bags out, maybe every quarter.
Okay.
You're going to be cleaning them once a month. People are going to be frequently, depending on what the item is, going to be touching the outside of the bag to reach in and take contents. Okay. So just during that monthly clean the outside of the bag.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I think this question is going to be more geared towards Abby, but say if we want to validate our cleaning processes with surface sampling, some of us are hesitant because that might take our room down. So say if you want to validate EVS cleaning and take a wall sample, how would we approach that if it was actionable and not taking a room down?
That definitely sounds like an Abby.
If we want to validate cleaning processes with a surface sampling.
They might have to take their room down to run through that procedure.
Or you mean if you recover things? Okay, so and I'm hesitant again to use the word validate because very few of us in this room validate anything, like in the true sense of validation. So from that idea, and I mentioned this, I think, in the Fusion chat, was that yesterday? I don't even know what day it is. So one of the things that I do like to do is recommend that you do have kind of a sampling pan post-cleaning. And in doing so, it's a sampling plan, and there's no inspectors in here, I don't think, I don't know. That's the information that I don't give to the inspector. That's something that you keep for yourself as a for information only, document. That's extra, way beyond what's needed for the chapter, and that's for you to remediate any cleaning issue that you happen to come across. One of the things too with cleaning and not being able to visibly see some things, I know people that will chalk an area in the ceiling of the clean room with a really light colored yellow chalk or something and make sure that it got cleaned. And they'll go back in and spot check that. That trick only works once, but if you have concerns or issues with that, that's something that you can do. But if anybody has questions about surface sampling, post-cleaning, just high-level stuff real quick. It's done under static conditions immediately after cleaning, once the space is dried. If you're gonna set action levels, they really should be 0 because you should not have any recovery at that point. Frequency of this, you can do it whenever you want. Quarterly, every 6 months, just as a spot check. And it's surface only. You don't wanna be doing air samples post-cleaning and it's kind of pointless. But those are some things that you can do if you want to sort of validate, I use that loosely, verify what's going on with your cleaning process. So Natasha, hopefully that helps.
And Abby mentioned sort of that the UV marker that you can put either the chalk or there's pens or inks you can do. If you have outside contractors or even EVS personnel that a lot of times that room's being cleaned in the middle of the night when you're at home in bed. So how do you know they did a good job? You weren't there to watch them clean everything. So that could be a spot check for yourself to make sure that what you're expecting of those people is being done. Any other questions?
Hi, I have a question about, you talked about the small edge, that goes around the bottom molding of the floor. So I do a lot of clean room maintenance myself. I was in a car accident last summer and broke my leg, so it's really hard for me to get down on the floor anymore. Is there any sort of tools or accessibility options that you would recommend for other cleaning staff who might need to get closer to the floor to help?
Yeah, on that edge you could probably use I'll call it a wand, a shorter mop handle to try and do that. But with the slats of the air return, that'll be a tough one because you can't just run, it's like Venetian blinds, you can't just run something over the top, you gotta get up in the crevice. So on that, there isn't a tool that I'm aware of that would clean those slats very well. That one you'll just have to sort of get down. Abby? In between each slat, I think that would get the top of the top slat, but maybe not get the bottom of the underneath slat. There's just, if there's something gross in our clean room floating around, where is it gonna go? Straight to our, see, I knew, this is why I didn't come to the podium, because I knew I would hit this microphone. But yeah, you're not gonna be able to, any of that stuff that's floating in the air is gonna go straight to that air return. So I really wanna pay a lot of attention when I'm cleaning that return. Thank you. Well, I don't see anyone else racing up to the microphone, so I'm going to thank you for your time and attention this morning and give you a few minutes of your day back.